Aisha's curse, the horrific swell that consumed her. Aisha Johns was the kind of woman people admired from afar. Born and raised in Alkmaar, a picturesque city in the Netherlands known for its cobblestone streets and historical charm, she embodied discipline, balance, and ambition. Aisha, the daughter of Surinamese immigrants, embraced both her heritage and her modern life. She excelled as a full-stack developer, solving complex coding problems with ease while maintaining a strict fitness routine that left her friends in awe. Her days followed a meticulous schedule: early morning workouts, followed by hours of coding, client meetings, and, later, quiet evenings spent with her husband, Kareem. Kareem had moved from the Gambia to the Netherlands to study and later became a high school teacher. They met through mutual friends and quickly fell in love. Aisha admired Kareem's calm demeanor and his compassionate heart, traits that were a stark contrast to her fiery ambition. The two of them shared their apartment with Chico, their loyal Chihuahua. The little dog followed Aisha everywhere, always by her side as she powered through her workouts or hunched over her laptop, typing away late into the night. Everything seemed perfect until the pain started. The first signs. The pain came suddenly, like a lightning strike to her abdomen, catching Aisha off guard in the middle of a code review. She winced, her hand instinctively moving to her lower stomach. At first, she thought it was just soreness from her workout, a lingering ache from her new high-intensity routine. After all, she was pushing her limits more than ever, determined to hit her fitness goals. But as the days passed, the ache didn't subside. Instead, it grew sharper, more pronounced. It wasn't just post-workout soreness, nor did it feel like the typical cramps she occasionally experienced. This was different and deeper, more sinister. Aisha brushed it off, chalking it up to stress or perhaps an overworked muscle. She tried to ignore the nagging discomfort and power through her day. But when the pain became unbearable, she could no longer push it to the back of her mind. One morning, after nearly collapsing during a run, Kareem insisted she see a doctor. A diagnosis. The sterile smell of the clinic made Aisha uneasy as she sat waiting for her appointment with Dr. Foster. She hated hospitals, hated the vulnerability of it all. But now, as the pain twisted inside her, she knew something was wrong, terribly wrong. Dr. Foster greeted her with a warm smile and began a series of tests. After a thorough examination and ultrasound, he delivered the news: adenomyosis. The diagnosis sounded foreign and terrifying, a condition in which the tissue that normally lines the uterus grows into the uterine wall, causing intense pain and abnormal swelling. It's not uncommon, Dr. Foster reassured her, but it can be very painful. The good news is we have medication to manage the symptoms. He prescribed Esmia, a hormone treatment designed to shrink the affected tissue and ease her pain. Aisha was hesitant, but she trusted the doctor's judgment. She had no other choice. Kareem sat by her side, holding her hand as Dr. Foster explained the side effects. You might experience some bloating, mood swings, and nausea, but it should improve your symptoms over time. Aisha nodded, trying to absorb the information. But something about Dr. Foster's tone, the way he lingered on the word bloating, unsettled her. Still, she wanted to believe this was the solution. The swelling begins. 2 weeks into taking Esmia, the initial results were promising. The sharp, twisting pain in Aisha's abdomen had subsided, and she felt almost like herself again. But then, something strange started to happen. her stomach began to swell. At first, it was subtle. Her jeans felt a little tighter around the waist, but she brushed it off as bloating, a known side effect of the medication. She tried to ignore it, convinced that the swelling would soon subside. But by the third week, the changes were undeniable. Her once toned abdomen, sculpted from years of dedication to fitness, had ballooned into something unrecognizable. Each day, Aisha woke up to find her stomach growing larger and harder, distended in a way that felt unnatural. Her workout clothes no longer fit, and even the simplest movements, sitting down, bending over, became uncomfortable. Chico seemed to sense something was wrong. He no longer curled up on her lap like he used to, instead opting to sit at a distance, watching her warily. "Kareem, something's wrong," she said one night as they sat on the couch. Her voice trembled, fear creeping into her heart. "This isn't normal. I don't just feel bloated. It's growing." Kareem put a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It's just the medication, Aisha. It'll take time for your body to adjust. Let's see how it goes for another week." Aisha wanted to believe him, but deep down, she knew this was more than just a side effect. Movement. The first time Aisha felt movement inside her, it was faint, a fluttering sensation that lasted only a few seconds. She froze, her hand instinctively moving to her belly. For a moment, she thought she had imagined it. But then it happened again, a subtle shift just beneath her skin, as if something was alive inside her. Aisha's breath hitched. Her heart pounded as she tried to rationalize what she had just felt. Was it gas? A muscle spasm? No, this was different. This felt intentional, as though whatever was inside her was aware of its surroundings. She didn't tell Kareem. How could she? He would think she was crazy. Instead, she lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, her hand resting on her swollen abdomen, waiting for the movement to return. And when it did, she couldn't deny it any longer, something was alive inside her. Dr. Foster's silence. By the time Aisha decided to confront Dr. Foster, her stomach had swollen to an alarming size. Her reflection in the mirror was grotesque, her body transformed into something alien. Every step she took was a painful reminder of the entity growing inside her. But when she tried to contact Dr. Foster, she was met with an unsettling silence. The receptionist told her the doctor was unavailable and wouldn't be returning for several weeks. No one could offer her any explanation for his sudden absence. Frustrated and terrified, Aisha turned to other doctors, but they dismissed her symptoms as nothing more than a rare side effect of the medication. "Give it time," they said. "Your body is just adjusting." Adjusting to what? Aisha wondered. Adjusting to the thing growing inside her? The forgotten journal. Aisha's world began to crumble as she realized no one was taking her seriously. She was alone, left to deal with this horrifying transformation with no one to turn to. That was until she stumbled upon the journal. It was late one night when she was rummaging through old boxes in the attic, searching for anything that might help her make sense of what was happening. Among the dusty books and forgotten mementos, she found an old leather-bound journal with a name etched into the cover, Dr. Eleanor Hyde. Confused, Aisha opened the journal and began reading. It was filled with detailed notes about hormone treatments similar to the one she had been prescribed. But the more she read, the more disturbing the entries became. Dr. Hyde's notes described not just medical experiments, but something far more sinister, rituals that involved awakening ancient, malevolent forces within the human body. Aisha's hands trembled as she read the final entry. The host will carry the entity until it is strong enough to emerge. The body is merely a vessel. Kareem's fear. When Aisha showed Kareem the journal, his face went pale. He read through the entries in silence, his expression growing darker with each page. "This is insane," he muttered, shaking his head. "This can't be real." "You're saying this doctor experimented on her patients, using them as vessels?" "I don't know," Aisha whispered, her voice barely audible. "But I think that's what's happening to me." Kareem stared at her swollen abdomen, his hand hovering over her belly as if he were afraid to touch it. "We need to get you help, real help. There has to be someone who can stop this." But Aisha knew it was too late. The entity inside her was already too strong, too far along. She could feel it growing more powerful with each passing day. The growing fear. Each day, the movement inside Aisha became more violent, more deliberate. It was no longer just a subtle shift beneath her skin, it felt as though the entity was trying to break free. Her once athletic body was now grotesque, her stomach so swollen that it seemed ready to burst. Chico, who had always been by her side, refused to come near her now. The little dog trembled in fear, barking at her from a distance as though he could sense the evil growing inside her. Kareem tried to comfort him, but even he was struggling to keep his fear at bay. One night, as Aisha lay in bed, the pain became unbearable. She could feel something pushing against her insides, trying to escape. Her screams filled the apartment, waking Kareem, who rushed to her side, his face etched with panic. Desperate measures. Determined to find a solution, Kareem reached out to every specialist he could think of. He contacted medical experts, holistic healers, and even spiritual advisors, desperate for any clue that might help save Aisha. But each expert he consulted dismissed her symptoms as a rare and untreatable, offering no real answers. With no other options, Kareem and Aisha decided to leave Alkmaar in search of a more experienced physician. They packed their bags, ready to face the unknown in hopes of finding someone who could help. But as they prepared to leave, Aisha's condition took a turn for the worse. The escape attempt. As Aisha and Kareem drove away from their home, Aisha's pain intensified. The entity inside her was reacting violently to their attempt to leave. The swelling in her abdomen grew rapidly, stretching her skin to the point where it felt like it would tear. They had to pull over on the side of the road, and Aisha's cries of agony pierced the night air. Kareem was helpless, his face filled with despair as he tried to comfort her. He couldn't understand what was happening, but he knew it was beyond their control. The darkness of the night seemed to close in around them, amplifying their fear. Aisha's pain was relentless, and the entity's movements inside her were growing more frantic. Kareem could only watch in horror as his wife was consumed by the thing inside her. Chico's fear. Chico's behavior grew increasingly erratic. He refused to come near Aisha, hiding in corners and barking at shadows. His once joyful demeanor was replaced by a constant state of fear. Kareem noticed the change, but there was nothing he could do to comfort the frightened dog. One night, as Aisha writhed in pain, Chico's barking grew louder, more frantic. He clawed at the door, trying to escape the presence he sensed within the apartment. Kareem, torn between his loyalty to Aisha and Chico. The possession. The nights grew darker as Aisha's condition deteriorated. Her abdominal swelling was now grotesque, her body distended beyond recognition. The movements inside her had become violent and erratic, and she could no longer distinguish between her own pain and the entity's insidious presence. One night, as she lay in bed, Aisha felt a sharp, burning pain unlike anything she had experienced before. It was as though the entity was trying to force its way out of her body, tearing her from the inside. She screamed, the sound echoing through the apartment, her cries mingling with the frantic barking of Chico. Kareem rushed to her side, his eyes wide with terror. He tried to hold her, but Aisha's body convulsed violently, her skin stretched taut over her distended abdomen. He watched helplessly as the entity's presence grew stronger, more malevolent. The doctors return. Just when it seemed that all hope was lost, Dr. Foster reappeared, his demeanor colder and more distant than before. He arrived at Aisha's apartment with a professional detachment that sent shivers down Kareem's spine. "I'm here to observe," Dr. Foster said curtly as he examined Aisha. His eyes were devoid of the warmth and concern he had once shown. "The medication has accelerated the process. It's essential now to monitor the entity's development." Aisha's heart sank as she realized that Dr. Foster was no longer a healer, but a spectator to her suffering. His observations were clinical, almost detached, as if he was studying an experiment rather than helping a patient. Kareem's desperation. Kareem, increasingly desperate and disheartened, continued to search for answers. He contacted every medical professional and spiritual healer he could find, but no one offered a solution. The more he sought help, the more isolated and hopeless he felt. One night, after yet another failed attempt to find a remedy, Kareem sat alone in the dark, tears streaming down his face. He whispered to himself, trying to understand how the love of his life had become a vessel for something so evil and beyond human comprehension. The final transformation. Aisha's condition reached its peak. Her body was no longer recognizable as human. Her abdomen, now grotesquely swollen, seemed ready to burst, and the entity inside her grew increasingly restless. The once bonded couple was now faced with the horrifying reality of Aisha's transformation. One night, the pain became unbearable, and Aisha could no longer contain the entity. With a guttural scream, she convulsed violently, and Kareem watched in horror as the entity began to force its way out of her. The air was filled with the sound of ripping flesh and Aisha's agonized cries. The nightmare unleashed. What emerged from Aisha's body was a nightmarish entity, a monstrous creature born from ancient, malevolent forces. Its form was twisted and grotesque, a nightmarish amalgamation of darkness and chaos. Kareem stood frozen, his eyes wide with terror as the creature, once his beloved wife, crawled toward him with malevolent intent. The room was filled with a sense of dread, a palpable darkness that seemed to consume everything in its path. Kareem's heart raced as he realized that the entity was no longer bound by human limitations. It was something otherworldly, something that had been awakened by the very medication designed to cure Aisha. Kareem's horror. Kareem's horror was indescribable as he faced the creature that had once been Aisha. It was a being of pure malevolence, driven by an insatiable hunger for destruction. The creature's presence was overwhelming, and Kareem was consumed by a sense of helplessness. He tried to confront the creature, to reason with it, but it was clear that Aisha was gone. The creature moved with a predatory grace, its eyes glowing with a sinister light. Kareem realized that there was no longer any trace of the woman he had loved. She was gone, replaced by something monstrous and unrecognizable. The curse lives on. As the creature vanished into the night, leaving behind the wreckage of Aisha's life, Kareem was left to grapple with the reality of what had happened. The curse that had claimed Aisha was still out there, an ancient force waiting for its next victim. Kareem was left alone in the apartment, surrounded by the remnants of a life that had been torn apart. The weight of his loss was unbearable, and he was left with the haunting knowledge that the entity had not only consumed his wife, but had also escaped into the world, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. The haunting realization. In the aftermath of the entity's departure, Kareem was left to pick up the pieces of his shattered life. The apartment, once a sanctuary of love and comfort, was now a grim reminder of the horrors that had unfolded. The walls seemed to whisper with the echoes of Aisha's pain, and the air was heavy with the lingering presence of the entity. Kareem's attempts to move on were futile. The darkness that had taken Aisha continued to haunt him, a constant reminder of the curse that had consumed his wife. He knew that the entity was still out there, waiting for its next victim, and the realization that he could do nothing to stop it left him with a profound sense of despair. In the end, Kareem was left with the haunting knowledge that the curse was not only a part of Aisha's story, but a dark shadow that would linger long after the horrors had passed. The entity had claimed its vessel, and now it roamed free, a malevolent force waiting for the next opportunity to unleash its terror. Moving forward. In the aftermath of the ritual, Kareem faced the challenge of rebuilding his life. The apartment, though free from the entity's presence, was a constant reminder of the horrors he had endured. He struggled with grief and the lingering effects of the curse. As time passed, Kareem found solace in honoring Aisha's memory and moving forward with his life. He adopted a new companion to help heal his heart and gradually began to rebuild his sense of normalcy. The darkness that had once consumed his life was now a part of his past.